In a matchup full of debate and discussion around two certain midfielders, the show was stolen by a fullback in midfield. Reece James last week has bossed both Arsenal and Barcelona in his altered role for Enzo Maresca. His midfielding displays have been prominent for a little while now, but now that his fitness is in top condition and he's playing more consistently, his world-class ability is there for everyone to see again. Arsenal last Sunday saw that, suffered that, so let's have a look at that. Now, Reece James has been hammered with injuries for such a long time now. It seems as if it was an endless amount of time out on the sideline. It is now turned into a level of reliability. He's in top form. James was once a high-flying fullback, even a wing-back for Thomas Tuchel, that perfected the art of balance. Excellent defensively, excellent physically, excellent technically. Reece James could be everywhere, whether that was locking up a winger 1v1 or putting on a plate for an attacker with immense creativity. But nowadays, he's altered and he's somewhat evolved. Due to the 25-year-old's fitness struggles, question marks raised over his capability to fulfill his old and most recognisable role. Can he really get up and down the touchline like he used to? That and the fact that Maresca doesn't really use his fullbacks in this manner. From time to time for special tactical occasions, you may see Gusto or Cucurella pushing up and holding width, but typically he enjoys using his fullbacks in build-up, mostly tucking into the back line, inverting into the midfield, or inverting into the half spaces further forward. Now, James has been deployed as that fullback tucking in on plenty of occasions from the right side and even the left side as well. But Maresca wants to take what was his once physical limitations due to injury and place him into midfield without the need to chase back intensely to cover the flanks. Now, how do you do this, of course? Well, you place him in midfield. This way, you unleash your technical attributes on the ball, involve him more in the ball with more touches, and manage physically the ground he has to cover. And I reiterate, give Reece James more touches of the ball, because this allows him to control and dictate a game of football much more. Use his expert forward passing to progress the ball to the next phase. Maresca's explained the utilisation of James in the past as always seeing him as a midfielder since day one, but emphasising that the biggest target around James has always been how can we keep him fit. Maresca has looked to get the best out of his game, to manage him best, and looked towards availability as the first priority. Using his midfield days at Wigan and within the youth ranks for reference, he still plays at right back now and again, as you can see by the heat map, but an increase in responsibility in possession from deep is quite clear. But as you may have noticed on last week's encounters, James is eating up ground and physically looks as sharp as he used to. Sunday's encounter was a ridiculously good performance, and him on Caicedo against Barcelona in the week were tremendous in eliminating any central progression in the Champions League. Maresca uses him in midfielding battles where there's more physical and duelling nature. But James has simply transformed as a footballer to be even more well-rounded than he once was, whilst his fitness and sharpness has slowly reached that world-class level again. We'll be focusing on that performance against Arsenal for reference, as after all, he was covering for a red card at Caicedo. A red card at Caicedo is not just any player. He covers so much ground, he might as well be two players worth. But we'll be looking at particularly in how many different ways he was used and just how he prevented the Gunners all game long. Now, this was a huge game for many different reasons, as you might expect. London derby, the two best teams probably in the country at the moment. It unfolded probably how you'd expect. It was a chess match met with so much aggression, a red card, fouls, but rotations quite a lot of the time to answer the fact that both teams were heavily man-marking each other. It was a very aggressive man-to-man press from Chelsea, as we can see here. We're going to look at Reece James and how he was deployed in many different aspects in this game, as the game state changed quite a bit, whether that was Chelsea pressing them man-to-man or Reece James covering for the dismissal of Moises Caicedo. Now, Chelsea in their man-to-man press I thought were absolutely fantastic. Enzo Maresca hasn't always been perceived as a heavy out of possession manager, one that's really well coordinated and organised, but to be honest with you, I think he should now, because that was a tremendous display. This and the Barcelona game absolutely proved that. But it was a very coordinated approach that limited Arsenal in so many different ways. You had Fernandes onto Zubimendi, Caicedo following, Eze and James onto Declan Rice. Now this was very interesting because Reece James, as we know, has struggled with injuries. Man marking and pushing on and locking on to Declan Rice is an extremely demanding athletic task. Declan Rice is literally the final boss for a footballing athlete. He's so powerful, he's so physical, he's so athletic, and Reece James completely and utterly matched him. He read the play fantastically, and Arsenal were very fluid in their midfield setup. Declan Rice would commonly rotate with Zubimendi or Eze, or he'd even drop into the back line, and Reece James followed him all over, whether he was on this side of the pitch or this side of the pitch. Reece James was tremendous, and Arsenal within their build-up, they tried to give the midfielders a little bit more space on the ball, more time, as Zubimendi and Declan Rice would arrive to the ball instead of just staying still, just waiting for the ball to their feet. Instead, they were roaming, they were floating, they were rotating about, and then they'd come towards the ball so they have more time with the ball. Well, Declan Rice didn't have that time with the ball because Reece James was so locked onto him. Physically and athletically, he covered every acre of the pitch, and Declan Rice, for me, there was no real instance of him powerfully carrying the ball forwards, mainly because Reece James was right on his tail. So the fact that Reece James is able to comfortably perform in this man-to-man press just shows how good his sharpness and fitness is in this moment, but also a reminder of how ridiculous of a footballer and athlete he really is. And then from this, within this phase when Arsenal would poke the ball into the middle, Reece James was so good in getting his foot to the ball, winning those 50-50s, winning those recoveries, second balls, ground duels. In fact, he won all of his ground duels against Arsenal yesterday. And when a player wins 100% of his duels, when it says a player wins 100% of his duels, that can be misleading. They might have only won into 1 or 2 duels, but Reece James had 6 out of 6 ground duels won, 5 out of 6 aerial duels won, whilst winning recoveries, interceptions and tackles as well. But of course, as you can see, his influence on the ball wasn't hindered one bit. An assist, as he's a dead ball specialist, 2 chances created, 1 big chance created, 6 passes into the final third. It was a complete performance by a complete footballer. Now, James within the Chelsea build-up was used in many different ways, and we will get to the point where Moises Caicedo was dismissed and just how effective and key Reece James was. But it was a very interesting build-up from Chelsea, as Wesley Fofana was pushing very wide. We don't see that as commonly. We didn't see it against Barcelona. It was a way to stretch Arsenal, to really pin them in and use Reece James as a bit of an extra man in build-up. Chalobah was the central centre-back, and Reece James commonly would drop into space into that back line to create that 4 at the back, and it was very interesting in how they used this, because I think they were looking to Esteval, Malo Gusto and even Reece James to create space. Esteval was pinning back Calafiori, so Malo Gusto had this room to run within the lines so they could pick out a pass through there. So he was a bit of a spare man. But at the same time, when Moises Caicedo got onto the ball, that's when Declan Rice would jump onto him. I thought Declan Rice had to jump onto 2 players at once. We've seen this a few times for Arsenal. Declan Rice did it against Fulham because of how athletic he is, but it was a little bit complex because Reece James is very clever within the space he uses. So whenever Caicedo got the ball, it probably would go back, but it would free up Reece James. And Chelsea, for me, didn't find Reece James as that spare man as much as they should have, but it was on for the fact that Caicedo could play a ball in there and bang, Chelsea progressed to that next phase. And Reece James was really key in getting that ball forward, whether that was a long ball into the channels or long ball into the flanks or passing the ball forward to Esteval. It was really impressive. And Gusto from there would provide a lot in his movements. Sometimes Estevan would pin onto the Arsenal centre-back, and then Malo Gusto is creating space for James to progress forward as he's got Calafiori locked on. So it was a demanding task for Reece James and a demanding task for Declan Rice to keep up with him. But Reece James was excellent within this phase. He's shown so much composure, brilliant in his forward passing, carrying, and overall tidiness on the ball as well. We can talk about how creative he is, we can talk about how progressive he is, but I think he prioritises tidiness first, and Reece James is just so good at that. Quite simply, he elevates Chelsea's build-up, and he is absolutely necessary for that Chelsea team once he's fit. He's so composed under pressure, he really is so good, using that strong build of his, using that strong physicality to really guard the ball, to protect the ball, to buy fouls, as he did draw 4 fouls within this game. But of course, Moises Caicedo didn't stay on the pitch for the 90 minutes, didn't stay on the pitch for 45 minutes, and this really hindered Chelsea on the ball. They didn't set up too differently without Moises Caicedo there, as Reece James was there to cover for him, but obviously there was going to be a problem if Moises Caicedo is not there. The ground he covers, it's like 2 players at once, similar to N'Golo Kante's influence for France, Leicester and Chelsea. So Reece James had a big job on his hands. It meant that Enzo Fernandez would drop in a lot deeper, and Chelsea did have to suffer without the ball quite a lot. They didn't have much success on the ball, as you'd expect, but they looked to hit them on the break. They looked to hit Arsenal, particularly when they're attacking them, when they're further up the pitch. This meant the likes of Pedro Neto, João Pedro, in transition needed to be found by Reece James. But of course, a lot of the time that Chelsea spent, it was spent suffering off the ball against Arsenal. In the second half, we saw Victor Gyökeres come on, Martin Odegaard, Moreno and Miles Lewis-Skelly. Now Arsenal had 70% of the ball in the second half, as you'd expect, so it was time to suffer for Chelsea off the ball. Now in terms of box defending this season, I think sometimes the likes of Chalobah, even Fofana, even Gusto have been a little bit suspect at times, particularly against Sunderland, but I thought they were fantastic. Apart from Gusto getting caught to the back post, they were very good here, and Chelsea did such a good job. The substitution of Delap meant that he was very deep, but he was an outlet in transition. Garnacho did a good job tracking back, but Reece James fulfilled so many different roles here. He did such a good job. Now before Odegaard came on, it was Eberechi Eze he was tracking onto, and Eze within the half spaces, as you've seen against Tottenham, is absolutely dangerous there. Reece James was so alert. He read the play fantastically, and Eze hardly had any success, mainly because he was being tracked onto by Reece James. So then after the red card, it was Mikel Moreno with the introduction of Victor Gyökeres on, and again he was tracking him superbly. With Eze on as well, it was sometimes Enzo Fernandez being pinned back, so this meant that Enzo Fernandez was in a back 5. Well, this creates a 5-3-1. As you can see, there is a lot of space to cover within this area. There's certainly gaps to exploit when you consider the space that is in between Reece James, Pedro Neto and Alejandro Garnacho. Reece James covered this superbly. Athletically, he's on the top of his game right now, but every pass, it was probably forced back quite a lot because of his body orientation, but of course how sharp he was to get to the ball. Nobody wants to take Reece James 1v1 because physically he's superior than you. He's superior than pretty much everybody on this pitch. So it was a full-blown case of forcing them back, and he did such a good job. Arsenal were putting in a lot of crosses, while Reece James was answering those crosses by coming into the box as well. Sometimes it was quite literally a back 7 or back 8. Chelsea did a really good job of staying compact. Moreno, as we know, he likes to box crash, he likes to attack the box. Well, he couldn't do that very well without Reece James in his way, despite his goal. And then in the final few minutes, when Arsenal really were pouring on the pressure, Reece James actually tucked completely into the back line as a right centre back, with Gusto, James, Fofana, Chalobah and Cucurella within the back line. Arsenal were really looking to overload the box, send crosses in with the likes of Saka, Odegaard and Martinelli. They were really looking to pounce on the fact that Chelsea didn't obviously have 11 men on the field, and putting in crosses, it just didn't quite happen for Arsenal because of how superior Chelsea were in the air. This helped Chelsea sustain the pressure, survive, and in so many games when you're sitting back, it's only a matter of time until you concede. I was fully expecting for Arsenal to go and pinch a goal, but because of Chelsea and how good they were, but because of Reece James, this wasn't possible for Arsenal. If Reece James was never on the pitch, covering all that ground and defending so well within the box, Arsenal would have won. Whether that was 2-1, 3-1, 4-1, Arsenal would have pierced through, because truthfully, besides Caicedo, nobody could have done what Reece James could have done out there in that second half. He was sensational, whether if it was reading the play or winning ground duels, clearing the ball, he was absolutely superb. That was his most complete performance since those Thomas Tuchel days, since those days of which he was performing at his highest, and injuries were not a problem. So Reece James was absolutely sensational in this game. It was an interesting game, it was an aggressive game. Arsenal will be disappointed, but I think in truth, without Reece James there, on a luckier day, they probably would have won. But Reece James, his influence is what got Chelsea a point in the end. Thank you guys for watching today's video. If you did enjoy, feel free to smash a like and subscribe to the channel. What do you think of the game? What did you think of Reece James? What do you think of Reece James and his midfielding role at the moment? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.